This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We got some new folks here. Let me just tell those new folks of you real quick. We've been around since 2010 when my daughter was diagnosed, and then you go to the genetic donor side of the question, and guess who got to be that? And that's me. Except that it turned out my daughter had a condition that was not ADD. It was another different kind of genetic condition that had the same symptoms as ADD, but I've hung in here with you guys nonetheless because it's helped me a tremendous amount. One thing I'd like to offer you folks who've just joined us is that you can never learn too much about ADD. I love the experience I had, and I beat it to death here. I was doing it every time. That there came a moment in my ADD training, because I went to an ADD coach academy, I became an ADD coach. And there was a moment about 1.5 years, 2 years into my training when things flipped. And I liken it to the foreign language learning process, where for the longest time you translate the language, and then one day you start thinking in it. And so that might happen for you if that hasn't happened yet. And you begin to experience and understand the ADD world from the inside. And it's not just something from the outside you're looking into and trying to find your own attributes to it. It becomes more of an unfolding experiential understanding. And then when you come here and you learn more about ADD, it gets clearer and clearer and clearer. Another important thing, it does, in my experience, it doesn't matter what our topic is. This is a great place to come to be exposed to. We've got good people like the folks we have tonight who offer very, very invaluable information on ADD. Pardon my dogs, they'll be gotten rid of shortly. So please come in as often as you can to learn as much as you can, and you'll not regret it. So with further ado, and to make the most of your time, I shall turn Marcy. Where are you up here, my dear? Where are you? Marcy, yeah, Marcy, let me find you over here where I can click you into.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so here we go. On your mark, say go. It's
Okay.
all up to you.
Great. Thank you. It looks like I am the host now.
Yeah.
I'm going to go slideshow and share screen and this guy and share. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So I am Dr. Marcy Willard.
And I'm Dr. Anna Cronky.
We are excited to talk to you about some of our favorite topics today. Anna and I have written a textbook and we're well known in the field of autism spectrum disorder. And we also have a lot of expertise in ADHD. And this talk is about what do autism and ADHD share in common and how are they different? So this is an exciting topic that we're looking forward to sharing with you today.
As we're getting it started, we would love if you guys didn't mind putting in the chat where you're from and what you're hoping to learn tonight. We'd just love to have that information and background as to a little bit about who we're talking to. So if you feel comfortable to share, that would be awesome.
Great. So ADHD versus autism. Prior to the last decade or so, we did not kind of have permission to put ADHD and autism on the same diagnostic report. And there's something scribbling on there that I did not know how to do that, but now we have a red line. So we have the crossover between autism and ADHD is one thing we're going to talk about today. And that happens in about 60% of kids that have autism and also ADHD. And what's very interesting is the social skills. So it used to be thought that ADHD, generally has social skills deficits. We now believe that sometimes it does. And autism basically always does because autism is a diagnosis that is about social skills deficits. And as a parent, if you have a child that has autism and ADHD, it's going to be harder to meet their needs. And I was a school psychologist, and I can tell you that kiddos that had ADHD and autism were some of my toughest customers. So we're going to learn a lot about them today and about what their needs are like. So before we kick that off, Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on in the chat?
Yeah, it's great. We've got folks from kind of all over the Front Range here, down in Colorado Springs and Ken Carl and Denver Centennial. So nice variety of folks. Everyone is local as we expected, and some folks with autism diagnoses, some folks with ADHD, ADD diagnoses, and so a lot of variety there. Some teachers in here, and people wanting to learn more about kind of the combination of those two and the similarities between autism and ADHD. Oh, and we've got someone in from California, which is exciting too. Someone out of state. So wonderful. So I think we'll be focusing on some things that you guys are here to learn. So sounds great. Thank you everyone for sharing.
All right, great. So here we go. All right. So with this piece here, I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about ADHD and giftedness. So this is an area I spent a lot of time, and I have a couple kiddos with this combination of features. And I can tell you that a couple of the biggest things about giftedness and ADHD. One is with giftedness, you virtually always have intensity. Gifted kids are intense. They feel things more intensely, both in terms of the sensory kind of perspective, and then also in terms of how sensitive they are emotionally. So you take that and then you add the features of ADHD, such as some trouble with those executive functions like planning and organizing and sitting still in class, turning in assignments on time, right? So that combination of symptoms can have its own unique challenges. On top of that, when you kind of look at the social skills aspects, it gets even more interesting for ADHD with giftedness. One of the things that we'll see is this kind of bull in a china shop type of a style of interacting. We will also see something where the child tends to kind of feel like they know everything, and they want to be the best, and they want to be first, and they want everybody to go with their idea. So when you see that as a school psych, for example, they would get into challenges socially, like working in a group, because they felt like they kind of knew the answer. And how come you guys aren't getting the answer that I know is true? We wrote articles about this, and we're going to share a lot of that with you today about how to kind of differentiate when you see these combinations. We, of course, can have giftedness and ADHD and autism, and we're going to have a look at some of those features as well today. Okay. Looks like this red line wants to come along with us everywhere. So that's just kind of a new way we're going to present today. We're going to be flexible. We're really flexible here, folks. So that's a part of the presentation now. So we're going to talk about ADHD and not autism. So what does that look like? You're going to see disinhibition. We're going to talk a lot about disinhibition tonight. That tends to be the hallmark feature of ADHD, and generally not autism as much. There's the impulsivity, you've got the inattentiveness, and being hyperactive. In terms of being inattentive, we see that quite a bit less with autism by itself. It tends to be the case that people with autism can be very attentive and can be very focused, especially on certain topics, certain things that they're working on, certain interests that they're doing. They might be very, very focused. They tend to be good at making friends. Sometimes this impulsivity will interfere with friendships. And we talked about this kind of bull in the china shop thing. Sometimes that can interfere with friendships. One of the big features of ADHD that you do not see in autism is the thriving in free play. Free time is their favorite. The spontaneity of things being different today, great with ADHD most of the time. And free play is fun. Physical tasks like sports, for my own kids, extreme sports. So they're not into like basketball. They want to like jump on their snowboard and fly and flip over backwards, things like that. I think that's not all that unusual. And then it was mentioned the bull in the china shop thing. It can be very thrill seeking. You'll see that more with ADHD than autism.
Okay.
All right.
And then I'll jump in and talk to you guys a little bit about classic symptoms of autism and not necessarily ADHD. And so challenges in social communication, right? So the sort of hallmark piece of autism is a social communication, social reciprocity challenge, along with repetitive behaviors and more restricted or narrow interests. There's also a lot of sensory needs in autism, and that's a lot of times that sensory sensitivity. Perhaps it's loud noises, perhaps it's bright lights, maybe it's food, textures, or tastes. But we do also see with autism a lot of tactile exploration. So really wanting to touch things, see how things feel. So maybe there's that love of the weighted blanket, or something very soft or something prickly. And so that's a big thing in autism spectrum. Tends to be that individuals with autism do have a really great ability to focus on a task. And some of the adult job programs that we've worked with in the past really were able to find very computer-based jobs that were more repetitive in the task that was going to go on for the whole job. And whoops, lost my page.
Sorry.
That's okay. And so, anyway, we found that people with autism did such a good job at that, and really liked that structure, as well as things like math and science versus like creative writing and literature. Usually math and science are our strengths above that. I'm in the Army. I did not like downtime. Yeah. Okay, that's a really great point. And because, having that structure and having something that's supposed to be happening, I think that a lot of the high school students that we worked with and college students didn't love this time where they could just be in the lunchroom chatting with others, where they could kind of be outside engaging in social. They really liked, a lot of times they would go to a favorite teacher's classroom, or a place that was gonna be very quiet, like the library, with free time, right? Because it was sort of hard when you have this really open-ended time. Friendships tend to be with autism based a little more on shared interest, and with our younger kiddos and up through high school, requiring a bit more parent support to cultivate and maintain those. So we had a lot of parents of high school students still kind of arranging their social schedules. And that was because it was just a little harder for our teenagers on the autism spectrum to manage the social aspects. So that's autism and not ADHD.
Okay.
Oh, cool. I like my job because I can focus on a single task. Yeah, finding items. Right. Because if you have to shift a lot, that's a whole different thing, right? Whereas if you have something that you're doing and it can be more routine, that can be very calming to our brains, and particularly with the autism spectrum. So yeah, I really appreciate these comments. So when we look at both autism and ADHD, you can think about a foundation of being sort of this autism basis, right? Because with autism, you've got the social challenges. And then when you put the ADHD sort of on top of that, then you're likely to start to get other things related to inattention and impulsivity and hyperactivity. And that's why Marcy mentioned it can be really tough for these very unique and bright and creative kids to actually really find their way in the classroom, because the social piece is hard. And then there's all these other distractions coming into play and everything, going on that's going to then make it even harder when you've got the impulsivity, the inattention, the hyperactivity. Yeah. So these are matching for both autism and ADHD. That's super helpful. I think that we get a lot of challenges with having conversations, taking perspectives, making new friends. Marcy and I have done a lot of work with teenagers, and one of the things that stands out to me and a lot of my clients who had both autism and ADHD is something social gullibility. So basically having a hard time figuring out who are the real genuine friends, and who's someone who maybe just wants a little bit of help with their homework because they know you're really smart, or they want you to buy them a coffee after school, or they want your French fries at lunch. And so we've done a lot of work with teenagers in navigating this and finding those real true friendships, because sometimes the kids that we worked with were more socially gullible, and that could be hard for them. They could, be mistreated in that way. So disinhibition, which we're going to talk a lot about, is a hallmark symptom of ADHD. This sort of impulsivity is really a problem when you have both autism and ADHD. So that can be hard, just hard to control the impulsiveness sometimes. And then focusing can be tough. One thing that we'll talk about that we see with autism a lot is this internal distractibility. So the idea that the distractions, maybe in a classroom, let's say, are internal versus external. So it's something that caught your attention that reminds you of something that you like or something you're interested in, and your focus shifts inward, and then you miss everything that's going on outwardly, right? Versus external distractibility is Debbie's being loud over there with her pencil tapping, and Johnny's over there talking to his neighbor, and there's a squirrel climbing that tree out the window, and I wonder what it's going to do next, right? So those are external distractors. And with autism, we tend to see a lot of internal distractors. But if you have both, then you're going to be even more distracted, right? Because you could be internally and externally distracted. And there's definitely a higher likelihood of sensory symptoms when you have both autism and ADHD.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
I know Marcy has a little game to play with you guys in the chat.
I'm quite the gamer, so there's always going to be a game when we are presenting. So what we want to do is have you scan over this set of symptoms, and why don't we have each of you kind of look at them. And in the chat, I want you to name which ones you think are autism or ADHD features, or both. So for example, if I was going to do sensory symptoms, I would put in the chat sensory symptoms, and we just shared with you that that can be a feature of autism. It could be a feature of ADHD, or both. So I would put that in the chat. So why don't you go ahead, just kind of skim through these. We're going to have a big reveal after this on what we think it is, but let's hear from you.
Yeah, take a few and what's your thoughts?
Yeah, and we'll put them in there. We're going to kind of have a read through, and then we'll show you what we're thinking on this. Repetitive behaviors, autism. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Thanks, Jeannie. Awesome.
Dreads rote tasks. Yes.
Nice.
Internally distracted. Okay, nice.
Nice.
Perspective taking. Yes, autism. Socially gullible. Yes, autism.
Driving and playtime, ADHD. Nice, everybody. Nice.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, both. Okay, keeping friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, keeping friends. We think that that's much more common with ADHD than autism.
Good job, guys. This is great.
Okay. Structure, predictability, autism.
Yeah.
Yep. Good social skills, ADHD. Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, maybe should we take a look at what we think, and you guys can let us know if you have questions about any of our thoughts here, or if you agree or disagree.
Yeah. So here is what we thought. So, okay, let's kind of review some of these. So who thought that executive functions meant both? We saw some of that here in the chat, right? So we definitely think that sometimes it could be both for.
Yeah, Jeannie had that there.
Yeah, Jeannie had that. Some other folks thought both. So executive functions certainly can be both. We see perspective taking more as an autism thing because the challenge with perspective taking to be more of an autism thing. A lot of kids with ADHD have fairly good perspective taking, actually. Good social skills, ADHD. Yeah, we see a lot of that with ADHD. I have two boys, both in high school, with some pretty significant ADHD. Both have great social skills. Doesn't always happen, and we're going to talk about sometimes when it doesn't happen, but that's pretty common. Dreading the open-ended social time, ASD. Yeah, very, very, very often you'll see that. What else do you notice, Anna, in the chat versus what we have here?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. Good at keeping friends, both. Actually, I think that's a really good point. We said ADHD, tends to have higher social skills, but people with autism can be good at keeping friends. We certainly work with a lot of individuals on the spectrum who have had some friendships that have lasted forever. Sometimes it's making new friends and small talk and chatting and that sort of thing. That's a little harder with autism. So I think that's a neat point there that Jan made. So yeah, great stuff, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and do we have just a couple of people that you'd like to unmute yourself and kind of share what you said and what you've noticed with one of these?
Your experience with this. If anyone wants to share, we'd love it.
Yeah. Let's take a couple of folks. You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
It says here ADHD people have good social skills. Is that what that means?
We see that is more common in ADHD than autism. There can certainly be types of social skills that are impacted by ADHD, so it's certainly not universal. But it is for autism. For autism, they don't have good social skills as part of the diagnosis. And for yeah.
This chart here where it says good social skills, ADHD, and keeping friends, ADHD, is this in comparison to ASD or is this as a standalone observation?
That's a really good point. So we are comparing it to ASD in this comparison chart here. We do see it more frequently that people with ADHD can make and keep friends versus autism. However, there are some significant issues with ADHD that can get in the way of making and keeping friends, and we're going to talk about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
No, what's dread rock task? What is that?
Yeah, so kids with ADHD, we're talking about dreading rote tasks. So things that are like repetitive and things that are very structured, consistent. A spelling test is a rote task.
Mhm.
ADHD, not having a good time with that. Autism, if they know those words, they might love the spelling test. So it's this idea of repetitive, consistent, predictable. People with ADHD don't tend to love that, but kids with autism tend to love that.
You know, what's really weird is some simple words I don't know how to spell, but if I write it down on a piece of paper, it's fine.
Yeah.
With me.
Right. Yeah. So there's something that's like an algorithm in spelling and in math that tends to be very organizing for the brain. And so if you're writing it down and you're somebody who kind of likes systems and algorithms, it tends to go pretty well.
Yeah, so weird. Like math, the same thing. I have a difficulty in math, but I can do I work in the healthcare, so I was a nurse and we had to do calculations. I can do them. They're fine.
Yep.
But math, forget about it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing your thoughts here. And certainly, Terry, did you want to share?
Yeah, another thing that people have noticed, especially my wife and fellow coworkers in the military, they know I didn't know that there was a term for it, but I now realize that, yeah, I do get internally distracted.
Yeah. Okay.
And then also a criticism that I got when I was a sergeant was that I need tasks. And I had to, it took me a while to realize that I'm okay with that. I like structure, I like predictability, because when I have that repetitiveness and structure and predictability, it allows me to take on challenges. And that's another thing that, and it allows me to open up and do more things during my work shift, especially at Target now. I mean, yes, I like I love focusing on finding items, but with that repetitiveness, it allows me to want to greet customers if I don't see the cart cleaner doing it, or
Yeah.
it makes me want to be a little bit more social when I need to be. So
That's
that's
so cool.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. So the
Thank you
thing
for
with
sharing.
structure, yeah, the thing with structure and predictability there is it can be very organizing for our brain to know what to expect. And then you feel like you can kind of come out of your shell more because it makes more sense, right? It's less nerve wracking when you know what to expect. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, so should we, oh, I love that, the INTJ and an ADHD, that's another way of looking at it, right? So that is introvert. Tell me what the N is.
Oh yes.
What is N?
Oh man, I forgot.
Let's see.
It has something. I know it starts with an I.
And then, yeah, and then we have a thinker and we have the
Intuitive. Yeah, it's
intuitive. Okay, and then the thinker and
And
the
perceiving.
judger, right?
Right. The P was the perceiving, the J is the judging. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
nice.
yeah, there we see. Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
ADH are introverts or extrovert?
This particular person just reports out that that's how they feel it goes with them, with their personality.
Yeah. So it's not linked.
Yes,
to-
not linked with ADHD.
yeah.
The thing is that most, now they recognize, kids that have ADH, they never had a label for it when I was growing up.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
knew I had it.
Same thing with autism, really. I mean, and like when I was a child, we never even heard about it.
No, and then in my day, I don't know about you, you're probably much younger than me, but the teachers thought, I wasn't paying attention, that I was just daydreaming, so they would punish you.
Yeah.
And it was very embarrassing,
Yeah. It's a really good point. It's super important. And it's actually one of the reasons why we do this is we really want people to understand that there are brain differences that are impacting our behavior and that punishing the person is not the solution. And we're actually going to talk about some ways that they can be helped in the classroom by not using punishment. There's other ways to be supportive.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we have
Okay.
a question here about if you have an inner voice in your head, could that be with ADHD or is that autism? So I think that might be sort of this distracted voice that's telling you to do maybe a lot of different things at once,
Right.
perhaps, right? So yeah, that does tend to be more of an ADHD thing. But we do remember a lot of more than 60% of individuals on the autism spectrum do also have those ADHD traits. So I think you can certainly get that in both. Lots of thoughts, processing all the scenarios. And I do think sometimes that perseverative thinking, if you get stuck on certain thoughts, that is certainly very consistent with an autism profile to get that real sticky thought. So
Yeah. I will also say that I'm pretty big on this idea of this mental chatter. We all have mental chatter. We all have these thoughts that are just running around in our minds, and mindfulness and meditation tends to be a really good support for that, so that we spend a little less time in our thinking brain and a little more time in our deep, authentic selves. So I could see
Your
that
brain
happening.
is overload all the time. It's always like 24/7, and it's hard. And then for my problem is organization, and then like leaving things around, like clutter. And then I have to look at, oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah, I understand. I can relate to that too.
Oh my God, it's horrible. I wouldn't want anyone coming over to see it, my house, if it was like that. I was like, no, but I know better, but it's just like, I don't know.
Right. Understood. Okay, well, we will go ahead and jump into some more content here. Okay, so speaking of a lot of things going on, here's a lot of stuff going on. Don't be afraid. It's all right. I'm going to tell you what this thing means. So Anna and I were doing assessment, and we wrote a textbook about assessment, and we defined 11 areas of child mental, behavioral, and developmental health. Right. So what are all the things? Come up with 11 things. That's what these big boxes are. 11 things. So we have understanding. This is about your cognition. We talked about learning, memory, communication, organization, which is also executive functions, your emotions, behavior, your daily living skills, motor sensory. Okay. But today we get to talk about two of these. We're going to talk about focus, which is where the ADHD symptoms like to live. And we're going to talk about social skills, which tends to be more of an issue in autism. We had some questions earlier about kids with ADHD have problems with social skills. Absolutely, they can. And we'll talk about what those look like as well. And so you'll notice the pictures behind Anna and the pictures behind me and the pictures in this framework are all the same. What we did was we looked at these most important symptoms and we decided to give them each a name and each a picture so that we can identify them. And you're going to learn about these particular symptoms tonight, the ones that are in the circles here or ovals. Okay, sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to start with looking at some common ADHD symptoms. When I say common, I want to let you know that in neurodiversity, people are different. So this is some classic hallmark symptoms. Not every single person with ADHD has these. And some people with ADHD may present very differently. That's okay. And we're going to just talk about what is most common. Hyperactivity. So you'll notice you've got the girl with the wind up here. It acts like driven by a motor. Okay, so these are people that are moving very quickly. As adults, though, you're going to learn tonight, hyperactivity becomes not really a diagnostic feature anymore. So we don't see hyperactivity, and we're going to look at this more tonight. But the biggest thing that we're going to see is inhibition as the hallmark feature, with hyperactivity kind of taking a back seat, especially in adulthood. Impulsivity, though, really, really key to ADHD. And I can tell you, I've written some articles about this. For any of you that have high schoolers with ADHD, impulsivity can get you into a lot of trouble, right? You do something and then you think about it. Oh, what did I do? So this is hard. Impulsivity is big for ADHD. I say that they can never quite scratch that itch. In little kids that have ADHD, sometimes it looks like they're not quite in their body. It's like, I need to scratch right here. I need to move over here. This isn't quite right, not quite comfortable. That's kind of the sign that this is present for a person or a kiddo. Okay. Focused attention. So we talk about this as an ADHD symptom that we don't see a lot in autism. It happens, but with autism, we tend to see that kids can focus pretty well, especially if they're really interested in something. They can get almost tunnel vision on what they're focused on. Okay. With ADHD, we see this as hard. The best way that I can describe it is it really shows up if the kid is really trying to pay attention. Right. And you can see yourself doing it if you have this, right? You're listening to me right now and you're like, I really want to keep listening, but also I kind of want to do something else. Right. And you're like, oh, my phone's right here. Oh, but that's interesting over there. Oh, but my dog. Right. And it's very hard. And you have to keep bringing yourself back and bring yourself back and bring yourself back. That's what this issue is with focused attention. Okay. When you have ASD and ADHD, you'll see both, right? You'll see there's some focused attention problems in both. Okay. Internally focused. So we were just talking about this, and I think it was Terry that mentioned, oh, there's a name for that. And yes, indeed there is. Internally focused is like, I'm distracted by my own thoughts, right? There's something else that I'm focused on, and it's not what's happening out here, it's what's happening in here. So you're having trouble focusing on the assigned tasks. This kiddo, is really focused on the paper airplane, not so much on the writing or the reading that's happening. They're in their own head. We talk about reinforced feedback loops. So what's a feedback loop? With autism specifically, and sometimes with ADHD, you get this idea of like, it feels good to think about this thing. And so I'm going to keep thinking about this thing. So I thought about that and I really like thinking about that and I want to think about that more. And then you're trying to introduce something that I'm supposed to do, but I really just like this, right? So it's like this loop of like, oh, that feels good. Think about that some more. That feels even better. I'm gonna do that some more. And then you just don't do what you're supposed to do, right? So this is commonly seen in autism, a little bit in ADHD. Okay, and we are going to have a look at another executive function here, and which is a pretty fun example.
Oh, that's not good.
Need this. Already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody. Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do. That's it.
Hello. Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
All right, awesome. Okay, I am going to escape here. I just thought of an idea. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if I can get rid of that red line. And ask you, what did you think about that video? Unmute yourself and feel free to share your thoughts on that.
Or in the chat if you prefer.
Oh,
Rather funny.
it depends. For me, it depends on the situation. I mean, like
Yeah.
on the escalator, I like the I had specific training on running. So when I was able to run, so part of my training was running up inclines. So if an elevator gets stuck like that, I'm thinking walk up the escalator, walk up whether it's moving or not.
Right.
But there are some situations where I get stuck. Like I
Yes.
said, even at work, sometimes I get stuck. If on the app it says look for a home, look for like a blender, and it's not on the floor, on the sales floor, then I'm calling the expert in the home area, or if they're not there, if the home experts are not there, then I'm stuck because
Yeah.
it might take me 20 minutes to find this item. Because they might have it stored in the back room somewhere that I'm not really familiar with.
Yeah, it's so easy to get stuck on things, right? Not necessarily here, right? Yeah, and they didn't have cell phones. Oh my goodness. I think this video was made a little while ago, but you can see, right, how sometimes when our brains get stuck, it's just hard to move around it. And I think Marcy has a good example of how that might show up in the classroom.
Yeah. So what you are going to see when a kiddo gets stuck like that is, imagine that the kiddo is like, okay, I need to get started on this thing, right? I need to get started. And they are just, staring there, and everybody's like, okay, just put your name, put your name down, put your name in the paper. Let's do this, right? And the kiddo doesn't have a pen, right? And what do? They just don't start. Right? Your brain doesn't go, okay, what's my solution to this? It just goes, okay, so I'm stuck here, right? So it's just this sense of being very stuck in my own thoughts, right? And so we're gonna have a deeper look at that in this next bit here.
I think another thing for me in my life that it took me a while to get past was physical, mental, and emotional threats. Especially as a teen, and it's easy to get stuck when somebody attempts to, somebody either strikes you or even threatens you, and then nobody does anything about it. You can't, you can't, it's like you can't tell your parents because they want you to be tough. And and some people might look at you as a coward. And I just, there were times growing up that I was stuck, and it took me a while to get to where I didn't feel that the threat of physical violence anymore.
Yeah. That's a good point. And we do get stuck, especially when we're afraid, right? So that is our emotional center of our brain telling us what to do, right? And the more we hold on to those things and resist, what's happening around us, we can freeze, right? Which is another reason why people get stuck. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Others who kind of relate to this whole getting stuck on the escalator kind of concept.
Yeah, we just had an IEP meeting for my son, and watching this, there were 2 instances that came up in the discussion of the IEP meeting with my son struggling. And one of them was they were working with money, and the teacher had an oversized dollar, and they're talking about how they're gonna they want to use the dollar as an example, and my son is just like, that's not a real dollar though. That's too big to be a real dollar. That's not a real dollar. And we had to they have to get around this idea of no, this isn't a real dollar. It's an example. So, and then moving forward, and another example is he was supposed to go into another classroom to work with a group, and the teacher wasn't there like she was supposed to be. So instead of going back into his classroom or charging into the classroom that didn't have the teacher, he just stood in front of a door until somebody came around to tell him what to do next.
Perfect example, right? Perfect example. Smart kid, and he's just standing there in front of the door. I don't have instructions for this, therefore I just stand here, right? And he's smart enough, but is he cognitively being flexible, right? Can I see a new situation in a new way, right? And that requires this cognitive flexibility piece, which can be really hard if you're really rigid about how things have to go, right? Really good examples. And Jeannie says that her son would do the same thing. So it looks like we've got a lot of consistency here in some of our experiences, which is great. And I would like to give myself a big hand. Look, the red line is gone. I mean, it's amazing.
Good job.
Stopped sharing it and it came back.
Okay.
Problem solving. Okay, here we go. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so joint attention. So joint attention is interesting. We look at this a lot. You can see this girl here, she's pointing, and this kid is looking at it, right? Look at that. Okay, this is joint attention. So this is the idea that I want you to look at something I'm looking at or do something I'm doing. And so I draw your attention to it and you join me. That's joint attention. One of the things, and we have some teachers here, right? And also some medical professionals, really important to get joint attention when we're trying to teach someone something or get them to do something. Because if we don't, I used to teach this when I was a school psychologist, if we don't have joint attention, we don't have squat, right? If the person isn't listening to you and joining you in what you're sharing, it doesn't matter what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very basic. And one of the things we used to teach is things like red light, green light, or we would play like this lightsaber game to be like, who has a lightsaber right now? And really try to get this person to pay attention before we even begin doing any work, right? So what we're gonna do is watch a video of a kiddo and you're gonna have a look at his joint attention here. I think this will work. Oh, yep, it does. Okay. So watch this little guy and see what his joint attention looks like.
Here, Sam, do you have some? Yeah. I think he's like coffee. Oh, look, pancakes. I'll put pancakes on there. Yeah.
I wonder if this will go up.
Yeah. Hey, Sam, look.
Did you guys see his eyes? When
Yeah.
my eyes were over there, right? Did you see his eyes go over there?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Okay. Now, what did you think about this little guy's joint attention?
He wasn't really like, he wasn't really interested or focusing on what she wanted him to be looking at or interested in.
Okay, okay, got it. What else did people notice?
God, I don't know.
So
Oh,
I was playing with the kiddo, right? So I was trying to get him to totally play with me. And then I said, "Hey, Sam, look." And I just did this with my head. Did you notice what he did with his head and his eyes?
he got excited. His eyes lit up, got bigger, and then he was like lickety split out of there. too.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
So exactly. So that's what we're looking for when we do this joint attention task. And for those of you who have ever seen an ADOS being given to test for autism, we have that little bunny. Why do we have the bunny? Because what we try to do is, do you see how he's looking at me right here? And we're playing together.
Mhm.
And then the bunny is way over outside of our field of view, right? So I say, "Hey, look at that. Hey, Sam, look." And I want to see if he'll just look on his own without me pointing to it or orienting his head towards it or saying, "Hey, it's over here," and grabbing his shoulders and turning him. But we didn't have to do that, right? Because he just looked right at it. So that's a great example of joint attention. So this kiddo does not have autism in the way he's presenting. He could have ADHD. We don't know from this, right? But it's not a sign of autism because his joint attention is really good. Any other comments on this? Anybody else notice anything interesting? Besides, it's really cute. He's super
when
cute.
his tone of voice got like excited, and that made him like turn around and look.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Mhm.
Right. So what does that tell you that my tone of voice got all excited and then he went to go look at it? What does that tell you from a social perspective? What's he picking up on?
I think he was probably more interested in that because you got excited in it too. So he was like,
Yeah.
go over there and look at it.
Really nice, right? So he's picking up on my nonverbal cues, right? And my social cues. I'm saying something exciting is happening. I didn't have to say it because he could hear it in my voice, right? So that is a really good sign that he is able to pay attention to my nonverbal, my verbal cues, and he looked right at it, right? So that's what we're looking for when we do that task. Okay. Oh, look, it went right back up. Awesome. Okay. So impulsivity. Impulsivity, it's super, super common in ADHD. As I mentioned, impulsivity can get kids in a lot of trouble, especially big kids that have big consequences for what they do. This kiddo here, he's putting his finger in the light socket. We don't want to see that. That's not good. Don't recommend that. So what we're seeing is this disinhibition. We're going to learn more about this tonight, but disinhibition is your biggest sign of ADHD. It's not even in the list. We don't have that on any of the letters. There's no disinhibition, but there could be, because this is actually a really hard thing for kids with ADHD. What does that mean? It means that I'm having trouble inhibiting what I would normally do. Normally, I would go put my finger in that light socket, but I should not do that. So I won't do that. That would be inhibited. If you're disinhibited, it's very hard to stop yourself. All right. So that's what this impulsivity or disinhibition looks like. Emotional regulation can be a sign of autism and ADHD. And sometimes that'll look like impulsivity because I'm so upset that I react really quickly. It can look impulsive, right? So you grab something that I wanted and I want that back and I smack you, right? That looks impulsive. It's actually emotional regulation that is causing that difficulty. Questions on this? Nope. Okay. All right, we're gonna, you guys know Russell Barkley? Pretty famous in the ADHD world, arguably the foremost expert. We're gonna learn from him a little bit about ADHD.
Now, what is it that is delayed? Two traits. The first is not the one after which the disorder is named. In that sense, the disorder has been misnamed. The first deficit to appear is inhibition, a failure to develop an appropriate inhibition of your behavior. And this will often emerge in the preschool years. And its first sign is usually hyperactivity, though it doesn't need to be so, but it typically is. You have an individual who is behaving too much, who is not suppressing irrelevant behavior the way other children are able to do. We will see this in their motor actions. There's a lot of action coming out of this child. We will see it in their verbal behavior. There's a lot of words coming out of this individual. And we will see it in their intrusive and disruptive motor and verbal behavior as well. But along with that, there is a cognitive impulsiveness, this snap decision-making, this quickness to do the first thing that pops into your head without due delay and due diligence, thinking about what the consequences will be. And then we will also see the restlessness, not just the gross motor activity, but the seat restlessness, which I think affects their school performance more than the gross motor activity does. But this will decline with age. So that is why hyperactivity is no longer the name of this disorder, because it declines steeply. And by adolescence, it's nearly gone. And by adulthood, it's an internal state. It's a feeling inwardly of a need to be busy and doing multiple things. Mm-hmm. And it's a busyness of one's mind, one's ideas. There is a restless quality to their cognition, but not to their outward behavior. In fact, our research has shown that hyperactivity is of no diagnostic value in adulthood. In fact, being restless is more associated.
All right. So we were talking about that cognitive restlessness and that cognitive kind of impulsivity. Terry, you were mentioning when your mind keeps roaming, right? And it's all this mental chatter. Anybody have any comments on this idea of this disinhibition being kind of the bigger thing in ADHD?
I think, we do things impulsively without thinking, just like, like for instance, like relationship, you impulsively get into that relationship and don't even think about it. You just get into it. And I think that's what's been happening with me with all relationships. So I'm an adult, but yeah, you jump into things and you do things without even thinking.
Right. And I see Carl in the chat. He's bouncing his leg, wiggling in his chair, and switching between fidget toys while watching this. Thank you, Carl. That's awesome. I will totally resonate with that. And I think as humans, it's hard to really maintain our focus when we have all this mental chatter, right? It's really hard to keep maintaining this authentic thought pattern. And yeah, some of those strategies like the fidget toys can be great, right? To kind of help us do two things at once. With ADHD, a lot of times there's a misnomer that, if they're doing something else, they can't possibly be listening. But a lot of times we find that if they get to do something else, they're actually able to listen more because their brain needs the other bits of input there.
And so how are we supposed to slow ourselves down without being impulsive? That's what methods can we use?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and it's actually really hard, right? One of the biggest things is to have a pause. Try to create a pause between you and the thing you're looking at or the thing you're thinking about doing, right? So it can be 5 deep breaths. It can be just, I'm going to walk away and come right back. That pause tends to be where our brain comes back online and our thinking starts to flow. Our emotions tend to react really quickly. But when we give it a second, we can think more logically, and we'll be able to act a little more rationally versus impulsively.
I think another piece is building in, like Carl was saying, using the fidget toys, or, people use a walking treadmill desk these days, yoga balls, build in a lot of that movement and activity for a lot of our kiddos with ADHD, right? We get them involved in sports just so that they can really have this different kind of outlet that allows their brain to focus at other times on other things. So I think that's helpful too.
So then what do we do as adults then to keep our mind more focused on, I mean, for kiddos, you can give them a toy or whatever, some kind of thing to do, but we as adults, what?
Yeah. So a couple things. We've been talking a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness is huge for adults, which is literally just taking deep breaths and observing your thoughts without going into them. A nice way to think of it is imagine yourself on the bank of a river, and your thoughts and feelings are the river, and you're on the bank watching these things happening. Right. So creating some space between you and your thoughts is big. And then another thing is you can do more than one thing at the same time, just like a child would do with a toy. You can have something in your hand to fidget with. You can have maybe two things that you're doing at the same time, tapping your leg, tapping a pencil. We'll give me some feedback from somebody there. There we go. So those are some strategies. I will tell you, it's really hard, and it's really hard for humans to really stay focused on what we're supposed to be doing. So those are some great questions. Okay. So now we're going to have Anna share some common symptoms of autism or autism spectrum disorder.
Fantastic. Okay. So this is a blown up picture of part of the large kind of graphic that Marcy showed earlier. And this is our socializing progression. So social skills starting from the early and more basic social skills all the way to the much more complex social skills. And someone asked a good question earlier, if your child struggles with a more early level social skill, like joint attention, when you're kind of doing those tasks, does that automatically mean that they have autism? Or if they do that really well, does that mean they don't? And we do find that some kids and adults don't have trouble with baseline social skills, but get stuck a little later in the social progression. So I think that that's a good point. I'm going to talk through this progression now. Okay. Oh, I thought there was one more slide in there. Okay. Actually, let's go back for 1 second, because I just want to tell you the first set that we're going to look at are going to be more physical social engagements. Across the bottom row, you're going to have conversational action-based engagements. And then we're going to have more emotional connections on the left side. So that's how we're breaking this down. So I'm going to start with the more kind of physical social skills. And we're going to start with social presence. Okay.
Yeah. So I was just going to add to that we, in this model, we believe that the social skills build on each other, and that the physical ones come online first in the development. And with autism, it tends to get disrupted and be a little delayed. The physical ones come on first, then these more conversational communication ones come online, and then the emotional pieces.
Yeah.
Okay.
So social presence. So that's going to be a kiddo who's in their first school experience. Maybe that's pre-K or kindergarten. They're the ones who hide under the table, the ones who circle the playground, but not going in to play with the other kids. The kiddos who tend to elope or run from the classroom when things get stressful, or hide behind the backpacks in the corner and the coats, right? And so a big thing about social presence, and this is something we tend to assess with very young kids, like the toddler that you saw in the video earlier, is are they able to be with others comfortably, right? So kind of hiding is the first thing, right? Can you actually be in the room with someone? And then we move to this piece of, can you focus on the interaction and the play with either a parent or a teacher or a peer, versus are you just kind of focused on the toy or object? And little kids on the autism spectrum can get very focused on specific toys and objects. So if we think back to the video Marcy showed you, if the little boy had kept playing with the little metal pancakes that they were doing over there, and when Marcy got excited and interested in the toy bunny, if he didn't notice or he didn't turn or he didn't care, then that would be an indicator that we had some questions about social presence there, right? What we saw is a kiddo who, like Linda pointed out, heard Marcy's tone of voice and really engaged. So he was focused more on the people than on the objects. And that's what we're wanting to see in early social development, is a focus more on the relationship and the play and a little less on the toy. And so ADHD does not cause this, but if it's a busy setting, there's going to be a lot of cases in which a child is too distracted by what's going on to focus on the social interaction, right? Remember, because with ADHD, we're taking in so many inputs and our brain's not doing a great job of screening out to find the most important ones. So even if socializing is the most important thing, maybe the ADHD brain is over here on this game that the kids at the next table are playing, or the bird out the window, and they might be missing some of the social pieces, right? So that's when you might see social presence come in with ADHD, but this is an autism.
People mute, that's really distracting.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Sure, I think, okay, let's try the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, and any questions, you guys can throw them in the chat too, and Marcy will tell me if there's something that we want to talk about. But now we're going to talk about varied versus restricted interest. So when kids are younger, it's very common that they might love trains or Legos or dump trucks. So it's common for kids to have very specific interests, and that's totally fine, doesn't impact their social skills. The problem is when they can't shift to other things. So if a kiddo is so focused on Thomas the Train that he can't go play with those trucks with the other two boys who are playing trucks, that he's very focused, he can only do the trains, and he'd rather be by himself or be just alone with the trains than be flexible and sometimes try other things, right? We have this picture of the Titanic here because we worked with a kiddo in kindergarten who really loved the Titanic. And whenever he was asked to do a personal narrative, which they did a lot in his class, or write something about himself or something creative, he always wrote about the Titanic. And that was driving the teacher crazy. It's the only thing he would write about. So it was a problem for him because he wouldn't shift to join the other activities and games of the other kids in his class because he's very hyper focused on the Titanic. Now, when we think about boys versus girls on the autism spectrum, we tend to see more of an obvious restricted interest in boys. So like that Titanic interest, or over here when you see the air conditioning unit. So we met a little 7-year-old boy who was very interested in air conditioning units. And when we first said, hey, tell me about your family, he started naming off everyone's favorite air conditioning unit, right? So that's it's unique. That's a unique interest. With girls, maybe it's horses, maybe it's zoo animals, maybe it's baby dolls. So the interests might just feel a little more commonplace and they don't stand out as much. And so it's one of the reasons that girls tend to get diagnosed a lot later than boys do with autism. So this is not an ADHD thing. Now, but be careful, because having a specific interest, that could be an ADHD thing, but you should have that flexibility to be able to shift to some other interests and talk about other things and shift off kind of some of those more special interests with ADHD. And that can be harder in autism. So yeah, anybody have any questions about that? Okay, let's swing on to the next one.
Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. So pretend play and sharing and showing. So these again are often things we're looking at in young children, preschool age children, like the ones you see here in the pictures. And so when a child can pretend that a cardboard box is a rocket ship or a pirate ship or an airplane, they're able to play pretend. They're using things outside of their obvious use. And when they can take those paper towel dowels and use them as an eyeglass, that's pretend and creative play. And then in the bottom picture, you see a little girl who's giving a looks like a paper doll elephant to a friend. So sharing toys and showing things of interest to other kids is really a building block social skill. And again, we sometimes see some kids who have some of these skills, but as the skills get more challenging, that's when you see difficulty. But if in a preschooler, we started to see, gosh, they're not really sharing and showing, they're not doing as much pretend creative play, that would be concerning because they're missing those social connections in the environment at a young age. And now in ADHD, these skills could be problematic in a situation where the environment had a lot going on and was chaotic or distracting. Then you can miss social cues, right? It's going to be very easy to miss them. But in a more one-on-one play setting or a quiet environment, you're going to see that these skills are working just fine. You're going to see a lot of that creative play, a lot of sharing and showing to parents and teachers and other peers. So that's that one. Okay, and so now we are moving on to our next level. I'm just going to look on my version. Because I thought we had a, maybe so, okay. Okay, works for me. All right, here we go. Okay, so cooperative play. Okay, so, that's okay. We'll do cooperative play. So on cooperative play, this is, you've maybe heard the term parallel play, which means kids play next to each other. They're not playing with each other. And with cooperative play, this is a real engaged playing with each other, right? And so it's important to see this develop. So parallel play is going to be very typical for 2-year-olds, right? But cooperative play, as kids are 3, 4, 5, we start to really see this skill developing where kids are playing with each other, not just next to each other. So there's been a lot of research on social development in the preschool classroom, because this is when we start to see some of these things with autism. And kids with autism are much less engaged. So they're not 37% of the time, in fact, they tend to be unengaged. So we really want parents and teachers to be intervening and encouraging some social skills at that time, if we can, because that's going to help the brain make better social connections. Now, if you think about a preschool classroom, think about one kid who says, "It's a fire truck," and runs to the window, right? Because preschool kids tend to love to see a fire truck. And then you look at the classroom and it pretty much empties out where everyone is pressed up against the window, right? So again, that's a joint attention thing there, but it's also a cooperative sort of play-based engagement. And if there's 2 kids like still in the classroom and one's reading a tiger book and the other one is building Legos and they just could care less, right? Then that's kind of indicating that they're not a piece of this cooperative play that's happening. They're more interested in doing their own thing, right? And developing more of a special interest there. So you kind of notice that difference, and that can be a sign that, oh, okay, well, we might want to look more at social skills. So with ADHD, kids can do cooperative play, right? They in fact tend to prefer it. Now they might sometimes be playing with another kid and be a bit impulsive, or go out of turn, that kind of thing, right? We can see that with ADHD, but we tend to see that play skills are a really popular and important thing. So here you'll see, sorry, I was looking for this earlier, but physical engagement, we've got the presence, interest, and parallel play there. And then with social communication, we're going to dive into that next and talk a little bit about these more kind of communicative social skills that develop. And we're looking for these kind of in childhood, right? So like school aged. Okay. Oh, and then we're going to do the, I think we're going to bring this up again, but we're going to talk about the emotional skills after that. Okay, let's go. Perfect. Okay, so this is a fun one. I want you, so put in the chat if you guys know someone with an autism spectrum disorder who is very socially motivated, meaning they want to have friends and they really care about social stuff. So just if if you know someone like that, just say I do or something in the chat. Just want to see if anyone knows anyone like that. And then I'll tell you about that at the end. So social motivation and social reciprocity are a little bit different. So social motivation is the desire to have friends, and social reciprocity is the ability to really make those friends and do that very well, right? So with social motivation, you want to, but you might not be great at it. But you want friends, which is great, because that means, with some support and practice, you can get good at it, but it's hard for you at first. Now, attention could impact social reciprocity, right? Because if we miss social cues, we don't realize someone's being friendly, or, we don't realize that they wanted us to play with them. Well, then that could impact our social reciprocity. But if a child is not struggling with attention at that particular time, if it's a smaller setting, if there's less going on, then we don't see as many challenges there with ADHD. Now, even motivated children can have social challenges. So, okay, now I just want to look in the chat and see if anyone had said, yeah, my son wants friends so badly. He's having difficulty. My son too. Yes, he wanted to play. Okay, Jeff and Jen, I'm going to let Marcy answer your question okay. And then, yeah, we see some more. Okay, so you guys are noticing that there are kids with ASD who are very socially motivated. And a lot of families who have come to us over the years looking for diagnoses told us that their pediatrician or their psychiatrist or a doctor before us told them, well, there's no way your child has autism because they want friends. And so that's one of those sort of myths and misnomers. And for a lot of the families we worked with, actually put them on a bit of a delay to find that diagnosis because they thought, okay, well, my child's really friendly, so I don't think they can have autism. Kids with autism can be so friendly, but a lot of times they just need more support in how to make those connections. They need a social group, they need some individual therapy, and they need to practice it because it just doesn't come naturally in making those connections, but they do want them.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for those of you who mentioned that in the chat, that's like a master level class because this is very, very misunderstood. Most people do not think that somebody with autism could possibly want friends or could make an effort in trying to make friends. And that is certainly not the case. It's very common that kids with autism will try to make friends.
Right.
Okay, and I want to comment because I think
for the school kids, you know how kids are, they're, you know, they're, if you're different, then they're more, not apt to understand you very much. I think that should change in the school. I think that, I don't know, I think that maybe educating some of the kids, you know, just make it simple and say, you know, they're just like you know, blah, 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 you know, they want to make friends too, you know.
I think that's a good point. We do want kids to understand that everyone's brain works a little bit differently and be really open and accepting of people's differences. And that's ideal. And I feel like, you know, even when I was a kid, kiddos in my classroom who, when I was in 6th grade, who had diabetes told us about their diabetes because the other kids needed to understand why they were getting shots and why they had a lot of interventions throughout the day, right? And it was very comfortable to do that. And then we could support, right? So I do think it's a good point you make, Linda, that it's, you know, really understanding and being open to the differences of others is so important. And I really want to comment on Jeff and Jen over here, because thank you for sharing this. So when their son was younger, he would want others to do what he was doing. And if they did, great, cooperative play. And if not, he would get upset and not play with them. I'd say that is super common in autism because, again, you're looking at kind of the child's looking at their own perspective and they know what they want to do. And so of course everyone else would want to do that. And then they get frustrated if that's not what the other kids want to do. So happy to play cooperatively if they can kind of be in control of it. It sets some structure. They know what's coming. It makes sense to them. And then they bring other kids in. But then the other kids say, oh, I don't want to play that. And then a lot of the kids we work with just want to do their own thing then. They're like, well, you know, whatever. I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do. And I guess I'm not going to play with you guys. So less flexibility and shift to like the other kiddos' perspective and what they want to do. So a little harder with that kind of turn taking and let's play my game, let's play your game kind of approach. And we saw, see quite a bit of that. Yeah. And then you said, okay, your son was diagnosed with ADHD and autism when he was 13. Yeah. Okay. So I was working with a 1st grader, this is years ago, who had both, right? And the school had said, okay, this is ADHD. Yeah, we're totally on board. But when I diagnosed autism in this little kiddo, they're like, no, that's not it. And then I ended up working with the family. And a couple years later, when he was in 3rd grade, and he did this exact thing. He wanted to play puppies and only puppies. And when the other kids were playing something else, he just went and sat on a bench. And anyhow, but by 3rd grade, the teachers, the school psychologists, we were all collaborating. They're like, oh, he does have autism. But again, it wasn't what was noticeable to them in 1st grade. And they just missed it entirely, right? And then we have Jeannie saying that, yeah, you know, the ADHD diagnosis in kindergarten, the autism diagnosis in 5th grade, so common. It's just, it's not what gets picked up first. And so in our practice, actually, Marcy and I worked with a lot of older kiddos who were kind of getting that second diagnosis where the family's like, yeah, you know, but there's something else a little bit interesting going on socially. And we want to understand that. And then that's when the autism piece comes in. Thanks everybody for sharing so openly. I appreciate the dialogue. Okay, so great job everyone with this one. All right, let me move the chat here. So then, yeah, interacting, right? So again, a child with ADHD may be disinhibited or inattentive to the game, but otherwise, you know, should be able to do this playing by the rules of the game. Again, there's going to, you know, maybe some impulsivity, but better skills as far as being able to do that. You know, we had a kiddo we were working with again in kindergarten who was jumping in the middle of a game, a ball game. The other kids were playing and just diving on the ball, and he wanted to play with them, but you know, he stole their ball. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm playing with them." And they're like, "He's not playing by the rules. He stole the ball," right? And didn't understand. And Marcia at the time had to come in and really explain to everyone what was going on there. But it was trouble with interaction.
Yeah. The kids came running up to me on the playground and they're like, "He's playing tackle. We're playing 2-hand touch. Why did he take the ball?" And they're distressed. And what we find with that is that a lot of times kids will be very patient with social skills in general, but they are not patient when kids break the rules. That is very hard. So it's really important to teach our kids to be able to play by those rules and follow what the other kids are doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so shared enjoyment is one of my favorite things, and it tends to be a little bit harder to tease out because a lot of times we think, okay, well, when a child is playing a game, say a child's playing Uno with a group of kids, and they're laughing and giggling and having fun, right? That is great, but it's not exactly shared enjoyment, because shared enjoyment means you're really engaged with the other players in the game. So, you know, it's a little bit like that social presence where you're laughing, you're smiling, you're making eye contact, you're listening, you're really engaged with the other person, not just having fun. And this does really feed into social reciprocity because you have to understand the other person. You have to kind of read their perspective. And this shouldn't be something that's hard for kids based on ADHD symptoms alone, right? It's definitely something, again, that a kiddo might get distracted and might struggle in playing a game, but their ADHD symptoms should not prevent them from sharing enjoyment. And that is definitely something that has to be practiced and taught with autism. Definitely can get there, but it's a lot of work. And then conversations. So when we think about conversations, we think so much about listening, because talking is not a conversation, right? So talking can offer a lot of information and maybe not listen or really be going back and forth. So when a child constantly asks questions, which we see a lot in our assessments, but doesn't stop to really listen to the answer, or when a child just doesn't know what to say, that's telling to us. So what we call dropped bids is when we're going to say something and we would expect a back and forth to come from it. And so a lot of times we would say, "The craziest thing happened to me this morning." And we just stop and we're waiting for the child that we're working with to say, "What happened?" Or "Tell me about that." Or "Really?" Just any kind of response to that, right? And you'd be maybe surprised at how often it's just dead silence. But if someone does respond, then we'd have a fun little crazy story, you know. Usually mine take place when I'm walking my dogs and maybe like a duck popped out of the pond and approached us or something. But then we have something to talk about, right? And we're looking for that back and forth conversation. And now again, in ADHD, in a quiet setting, conversation should be okay. A lot of times a kiddo with ADHD wants to tell you a lot of stuff up front, but then they should be able to go back and forth and really take perspective after they've kind of gotten their piece out. And for autism, it can be harder. And I have this picture of an ankle on here because I was doing an assessment. I had sprained my ankle. I was wearing a big old boot cast, but we were sitting down at a table, and I was working with a 15-year-old, and he asked me at one point, he had been answering like every question correctly. We were doing a vocabulary test. He's just rocking it. And he said, "Hey, I need to take a bathroom break." And I said, "Oh yeah, let me show you where that is." And I got up, and I'd been having trouble getting anything conversational out of him. So I wanted to see if I could get anything sort of more related to a physical thing, my ankle. So when I put weight on my ankle, I said, "Oh my gosh, it really hurts." And I just kind of proceeded to exaggerate my pain as we were walking. And he just looked at me, and I could see in his eyes like, what am I supposed to say to her? Like, what do I say here? And he didn't say anything. And this was a kiddo who had been diagnosed with ADHD when he was 5, and I was seeing him at 15. And we did diagnose autism spectrum disorder at that time. But he had gone that whole time just being this very quiet, sweet kiddo who just had no idea what to say in a conversation, and really just was a loner and did his own thing. And so, but yeah, I really was trying to get him to engage with me. And I thought like a more physical thing where he could just say, well, what happened to your ankle? You know, but he really just didn't know what to say. So just an example of conversations there. Anybody have any examples? Oh my gosh, it's 7:53. Yeah, Marcy's just telling me we're running out of time. Okay, anybody have any examples they want to share, or are we okay there? Okay. Yeah, and we do understand if you guys have to go. I promise you will get Eric the PDF of all of this information. So yeah, I apologize for that. So perspective taking, we've kind of talked a bit about this, and perspective taking, again, is this idea that somebody else has different thoughts and feelings and ideas than you do. And sometimes with autism, kids tend to get sort of stuck in their own perspective and not realize that other kids feel differently, or not really understand how other kids might be feeling about a situation. And so that is what we mean by perspective taking. And again, ADHD, more about impulsivity, but there's no sort of core reason that a kid with ADHD would have trouble with perspective taking. Okay. Okay, and then our last set are the emotional skills. So we're talking about emotional insight. So this is an idea of understanding yourself and your identity. And sometimes these are the areas, these emotional areas are the ones that stand out when we diagnose teenagers with autism who have maybe been diagnosed much younger with ADHD. And it's this, we have a hard time talking about themselves. So I ask a very bright kid, well, tell me what you care about. Tell me what's important to you. Tell me what you're good at. And just lots of, oh, I don't know. So it becomes that comparison between if I ask you a question that's more mathematics or more vocabulary, and you know that, but then when I ask you, just tell me something, tell you something that's important to you, and they're not able to do that, right? So it's this personal insight. And for ADHD, you know what, kids are a little later to develop, and sometimes they're a little less mature, and they may miss social cues because of some inattention, but again, tend to be good at emotions and perspective when you move past some of those attention pieces. So that's insight. And then 2 more. Empathy. So we don't mean coldness here. We mean empathic understanding. So actually, a lot of times kids on the autism spectrum might overreact to another child crying, or a perception that someone is sad or upset. So they may overreact to that, but they're misunderstanding all the feelings of this in this situation. So can a child really understand the feelings and reactions without over or under interpreting them? And that tends to be an autism thing. And for ADHD, when you might get this is because a child missed something in the environment that was going on. Like you're talking to your child, perhaps the TV is on, and they totally missed the conversation, right? Because again, they are trying to pay attention to 2 things and the TV had their attention. So then you might miss something and not have an empathic response, but it's more about the attention than the empathy piece. And then just mentioning empathizing versus systemizing is this concept that everyone falls on this continuum, and empathizing, you're really all about feelings, and systemizing your numbers, your facts, your science, so it's this continuum. And they call it in the research an extreme male brain perspective, because they feel like that the systemizing brain is a little more of a male brain, and empathizing tends to be a little more female, but we all there's this full continuum here. So I know, I'm sorry to be going quickly. Okay, and then intimacy is about developing close and meaningful friendships. So it's our highest level skill. So we think about all those other skills building up and us reaching this level of intimacy. And it's that ability to have a meaningful friendship. And there's a picture here of me interviewing a teenager with ADHD, and he is telling me a story about how he met his girlfriend, and just understanding sort of her feelings and his nervousness and what it was like to ask her out and how he wanted to make her feel special. And so, kids with ADHD definitely can more readily and more easily, they tend to be able to read those relationship cues. use. So again, maturity is a factor. Yes, I wanted to tell you a touch about CHADD. So CHADD, you saw the framework earlier that Dr. Willard and I have developed, and we wrote a textbook on that around 2016, and then we developed a tool for clinicians. So we have hundreds of clinicians that use our assessment tool. And we've developed a parent version because we heard from so many parents, again, like, wait, I was worried 5 years ago, and now you're telling me that my child has autism or ADHD or anxiety, and just that desire to have access to the knowledge and the information earlier. So CHADD's a free app, and you go in and you answer some questions in our 11 areas, and you're going to get in the moment strategies to try. Now you'll get a quick set of strategies, but when you come back to the app, you'll get new strategies, and you can make a plan out of strategies you like. And if you tell us, I like that, or I don't like that, then the app's going to learn from what you tell us and give you strategies that we think will help you based on what you're telling us throughout your experience with it. So, yeah, you know what? You can use CHADD for adults. We do have a set of recommendations for adults in CHADD. It's mostly geared for like 3 to 18, but try it if you're an adult, because we will have some things in there. It's just, it was written a little more with the school age kids in mind. Let's see, let's switch to the next slide, Marcy. I'll tell you a little more about it. Yeah, so basically we use AI inside the tool to help us give you more appropriate recommendations the more you use it. So to gear things more towards the interests and the things you want to know more about, right? It's based on this validated assessment that clinicians use that we have called CHADD. That's an assessment tool we wrote with 11 other developmental pediatricians and clinical psychologists and school psychologists, all who were experts in assessment. So it is based on a real valid clinical tool, and but you can use this on your phone. It's just a web-based app, and again, the more feedback you put in, it'll give you more strategies. So it's a new tool for us, and we would love for you to try it and love for you to share it with others, and we'd love to have your feedback on it, because we just really want to put things out there that parents can use so they don't wait or feel like, you know, that they don't know what's going on or how to help their family members. So yeah, please do try it. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Let's see, what do you think? Eric, would you like us to continue? We have a few more slides. People, for sure, we understand if you need to go, or do you want us to just go ahead and wrap it up right now, Eric? What would be your preference? Okay, I don't know. Oh, well, maybe we want to keep going, and just guys, we'll keep going. Drop off if you need to go. What we will do is share this in PDF. We'll also post it so that you guys will have access to all this information afterwards. Okay, Marcy, yeah. Back to you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just a little bit more about CHADD and how you can use it. One thing that we want people to know we have available that we can help you with if you have a kiddo with ADHD and you're trying to figure out school. We talk about advanced learning plans for gifted kids. How do you get those and what are those used for? They tend to be really vary by school on whether they're super helpful or not, and how much services and supports you actually get for this. They tend to develop goals around their exceptionalities. So what do they need? And also how can they extend their learning for their giftedness? So that's what an ALP is. A Section 504 plan is an accommodation plan that is not in special ed. It does have some legal protections with it. And it is something that we recommend if your child has one of these, you would review it with your teachers every single year, have a sit-down meeting, a conference with the teachers, and talk to them about this plan so that everybody's on the same page, especially as you approach middle school. So really important to use those plans and make sure that they're communicated. And then an IEP, this is in special education, and it does have services attached to it. Kids with ADHD aren't as likely to get an IEP. If they do get it, it's under other health impaired. OHI is the criteria, and it's pretty hard to get. If you do navigate these paths and you need help, Anna and I do help families with this. So looking at how do I get one of these plans, and do I need one? We've had some interesting luck with the ALPs lately. School districts are really handling these differently, district by district. So those kinds of tools and techniques are also listed in the CHADD app. ADHD at home, here's some resources that we really like. If you have a kiddo with ADHD, here's some of our favorite books for parents to be looking at. A few fun ones for kids. So Personal Space Camp is really cute. This is a book that your kid can read or you can read with your child. Miss Gorski, I think I have the Wiggle Fidgets is pretty fun, if you can say it. And then we also have some fun ones. My Mouth is a Volcano is really cute. Interrupting Chicken is another great one. Soda Pop Head. Those books also are in the CHADD app and on our CHADD website, where we provide a lot of resources. We will, as we mentioned, these links will be in the doc that we'll send to you. Any questions about books while we're sitting here?
So can I read these two as an adult?
Yes. So we would recommend more of these. These are geared a little more towards parenting. In terms of books for you to read as an adult, I actually have some different ideas. If you would like to email Anna and I would be happy to send you some. And my email's at the end here.
Okay.
One of the big things that'll be important for you and what you've been sharing is mindfulness and learning how to kind of not be all caught up in my thoughts. And so there's different ways we can explore that.
Yeah, I took a mindfulness class. I think it was about 6 months long or so.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty interesting. First, when I first joined it, I was looking at everybody else. I said, my God, I said, dude, they're worse off than I am.
Yeah. Well, that mental chatter is shared by all of us. It's just with ADHD and with autism, it makes it even harder. It tends to run a little faster and a little more incessantly. So this is just a story about one of the people who's used the CHADD app. Her son had epilepsy, but because of the epilepsy, he had a lot of symptoms of ADHD, kind of like what you shared, Eric. Sometimes there's a lot of crossover with other genetic disorders. And she used CHADD to find a specialist to help her child, and it actually worked out really great. So we just shared her story here. And then we are really happy that we can do this today. This is the website, chadd.co. We would like you to go ahead and try CHADD and share it with your friends. Linda, my email, we'll stick it in the chat. Anna, why don't you stick both of our emails in the chat for
Yeah, I did, but I'll put them in there again. Yeah, it's just our names at chadd.co. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. So if you want a specific book for you, or if you heard something tonight that you thought, gosh, I really want to know more about that, feel free to shoot us an email and we'll get right back to you with some ideas. And
it's been really helpful.
Great.
This is the first time I've attended something like this. Like I said, I was later, in life when they diagnosed me. So
yeah,
I've been dealing with this all my life,
Yeah.
As an adult, it starts to affect your work too.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. ADHD is misunderstood that way, right? Because it can cause a lot of challenges, right? Because your brain is actually getting kind of ahead of you, right? And you're trying to do these tasks, and your brain is doing things kind of almost without your knowledge or your consent necessarily to do those activities. So before we close tonight, I would love for folks to just put a comment or a hashtag in the chat about what you thought about tonight, maybe something you learned or something you found interesting from tonight.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate your attention. It's a long talk, but we've really enjoyed hearing.
Yeah, all the interaction and people had awesome ideas. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
And I put our emails in the chat. Do reach out to us. Absolutely. Do we provide supervision?
A quick moment. Are there any questions out there that somebody's bursting to ask?
I have just a quick question.
Sure.
Most of this is focused on children. and I don't hear a lot of discussion about what happens for adults, especially those of us with late diagnoses. I was diagnosed in my 20s with ADHD, and now I'm in my late 40s looking at possibly autism as well. And what kind of resources are out there for us to dive deeper into that and kind of, start, looking at a better map of where to plot our lives?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're right. We did kind of gear this talk a little bit more towards children, because that's kind of a lot of the time that Anna and I have spent clinically, although we have worked with tons of adults.
I completely understand, because that's where most of the focus is.
Yeah. In terms of, you say you're looking for like more like books you can read, or what kinds of resources would be helpful to you?
Just kind of just a general survey of what is out there, both books and other resources. I know there's coaches and, but I don't see many, I don't see many resources that fit me, I think, because, I'm starting to think I'm triple exceptional.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Carl, have you connected with Leanne Paslovich at Autism Society of Colorado?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Have you connected with Leanne over at Autism Society of Colorado?
No, I've just started exploring a possible diagnosis within like last month.
Yeah, they have a number of adult groups, I believe. We were meeting with her a few weeks ago, and I want to say she mentioned having a number of different like adult groups and resources and things that there might have some cool things you may want to attend. I know Beth Wolf with Gather and Grow does a lot of social stuff with adults and mindfulness, but around things like ADHD and autism. And Beth is like, I think in Longmont at Gather and Grow, but I know she facilitates some things for Autism Society Colorado. And Leanne over there, they do a lot of things, with adults. So they're pretty plugged into what's going on as far as resources to kind of connect with those in the community and learn more. So that could be good. And you can also feel free to email us directly. We can try to connect you, with some folks that way too. So, cause yeah, you're right. And I think, in the years that we did a lot more diagnosis, we did work with a lot of adults, and it was really hard when a lot of us were younger. There just weren't these resources out there. And so, a lot of adults are kind of coming to realize that they have these symptoms, a little later in life. And there are fewer things there, but I do think the Autism Society of Colorado tries to really offer supports for adults, and it definitely can look to connect you with other things too if you want to reach out.
Sure, yeah, I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's a great offer. Thank you.
I love that hashtag. I found everything interesting. Awesome. We'll take it.
Yeah, thanks you guys.
Thank you.
I did want to call out to Wayfinder, Anthony Verducci's, for a partner of ours, and he has a site that allows people to find different kinds of service providers. So if you're looking for a good speech therapist in Colorado, or a certain kind of psychotherapy, or a certain thing, Wayfinder, it's the website's in our slide deck. It's like join Wayfinder.
Wayfinder.
Yeah,
okay.
They do categorize a lot of the different services that are provided here in the state of Colorado. So it's a free site that people can use if they happen to be looking for anything specific.
Wayfinder.com or?
It's joinwayfinder.com.
Join Wayfinder, okay.
Yeah, it's great. And it's free, and they provide some great resources. Carl, that might be great, a place for you to poke around and see if there's some good resources that might fit your needs.
That's huge. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, this has been such a kick. Thank you so much, everyone. And thanks for being so interactive and involved.
Well, I'll tell you what, everybody, next time we'll get people who know what they're talking about, okay?
It's our first time, Eric.
You guys are great. That was really awesome. I appreciate it. And so stand by. The website will, on our website, will pop up the recording, and then y'all will be sending the PDF as well. Okay, slides, and we'll get that to you too, okay?
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, guys. We'll probably have you on again, so stand by.
Thanks, everyone, so much. Have a great night.
Good night.